Once upon a time, 4 blind men were arguing about what an elephant is. So they ventured to find out when their whole village was scurrying about everywhere. Why? There was an elephant on the loose. That was when the first blind man bumped into the creature.
Goodness, it's like a huge wall.
No, it's like a snake indeed.
It's rather like a big fan.
I think it has a spear. The 4 of them argued incessantly until the zookeeper came along and settled the matter, that the different observations could come to reveal the wholesome truth. All of them got a part right.
But what about the elephant? In the story, who is telling the tale of the elephant? First, it is the 4 blind men, and then the zookeeper. But the elephant never gets a chance to tell its own story.
We are the elephants. We live in a world where others and our surroundings constantly try to define who we are. And we let them do so by using what they say about us to construct the stories of ourselves.
Defining oneself is a daunting task. The reality is that it is difficult discerning what is from you and what is from your parents, family, friends, professors, television, magazines, you name it.
That's why we're here, to challenge you to tell your stories from your perspective rather than regurgitating or reacting from the stories of you told by others.
For the past 4 years, Show Some Skin has challenged our community at Notre Dame to explore and redefine themselves around the issues of identity, race, inclusion, and difference. We received hundreds of anonymous monologues. Our writers took agency to delve into the very core of their identity and share with us their stories. The collection of these stories have become a portal into the pulse of campus and the issues that are affecting the lives of our students.
In the elephant story, the 4 blind men each encountered only a fraction of what the elephant really was, and they drew conclusions from it, very limited conclusions, that the elephant was a wall, a snake, and a fan. Now, in our own lives, people draw conclusions like,
"You're black at a prestigious university. You must be an athlete."
"Oh, you're from the Middle East. Are you a terrorist?"
"Ecuadorian. Like Mexican? Are you illegal?"
"Asians never tip. Why don't you all go back to China?"
"Native Americans are filthy loaded from casinos. Do you have any extra feathers for my Halloween costume?" Now, not only are these conclusions extremes and incorrect, they're not all that make up a person. But the most alarming aspect is that these misconceptions stick with us, and they find their ways into our narratives.
For example,
"I'm black, but I'm Haitian. That's different. And no, I'm not ghetto."
"I was born in Minnesota. Like, that's where I'm from. I'm not exotic. Yeah, like I'm a citizen here. And yeah, I can be bilingual."
These are reactive responses. We attempt to reconcile our perceptions of ourselves with the perceptions of others. In our heads, we are constantly dealing with the blind men telling us who and what we are, and our real voices are submerged.
That's why we need to change how we share about ourselves. We need to find our voice and identity and claim it. We call this centering. By centering our voices in our stories, we leave behind the labels, the stereotypes, and what others say about us. But first, how are we all actors in spreading the misconceptions of ourselves?
In an anonymous monologue called Strong Black Women, written for our first performance, The Race Monologues, we can hear how the voices outside of the writer dominates her words.
I am a strong Black woman, supposedly full of heat, from my hips and lips and thighs, from my hands down to my feet.
Now, although the writer affirms her identity as a strong Black woman, she is trapped in the perceptions of others. She cannot escape the overly sexualized racial stereotype of the Black female body. In Oh My Allah, a monologue written by a Middle Eastern individual, the writer recalls an encounter she had in the 6th grade. After she tells her friends that she is of Middle Eastern descent, the story unfolds.
Oh, so you're a terrorist. Thank you, 9/11. No, I'm Catholic, and my ancestors were killed by Muslims. In fact, my family fled the Middle East from Turkish Muslim invasions after being raped, starved, and murdered.
After the strike of being labeled a terrorist by her friends, the writer dissociates herself from her Middle Eastern identity and highlights how she is not the Muslims. She does so because the label of terrorist monopolizes the Middle Eastern identity. She is stuck in the defensive. She is unable to perceive that she has the agency and the choice to tell her story from her perspective.
The thing is that we all do this. We all naturally react and respond to what others say. But sometimes we forget that we have spent all of our breath reacting rather than saying what is more important. That's why the elephants need to make the choice to speak up.
And not only do the elephants need to speak up, but they need to reform the way in which they tell their stories so that the blind men don't limit them.
In the anonymous monologue called Wild and Free and Frightening, the writer shares his story from his own perception of his evolving self.
I came here, and I felt that I was brown for the first time. My warrior, my sun jaguar, the Azteca inside of me rose up, and my flower woman, my sacred feminine, my Guadalupe Tonantzin bloomed within me, and my Spaniard, in his cold steel armor, reconciled himself, and he took the flower woman's hand and the sun jaguar's hand, and my blood mixed with the cosmic explosions of old and new, brown and white, Spanish and Nahuatl, conquer and conquered.
For the writer, there is no tension of judgment from the outside or within. The writer claims his own brown skin and his sexual orientation. He is not afraid of flipping the racial hierarchy of importance.
He legitimizes his own community as a central listener rather than an assumed white audience. He refuses to acknowledge any outside perception of who he might be. This dynamic challenges what others would expect him to say.
Like the writer, you can make purposeful choices to shift how others think and talk about you. Your voice can stand independent from what others have to say. Because no one can do the job for you, we are in desperate need.
If we had found all the ways to center ourselves back to our genuine core, we wouldn't be standing here today. Centering is unique to each and every one of us and our own understanding of ourselves. We can give you examples, but ultimately, your centering will have to come from you.
Today we shared with you how the anonymous writers of Show Some Skin have given us hope that many of you out there are inventing new ways to challenge the narrow perceptions of identity in the face of racism, sexism, heteronormalcy, ableism, etc.
We all have our own stories, but the way in which we tell those stories needs to change. Centering challenges those reductive versions of who you are.
Centering restores the loss of autonomy and self.
Centering combats the isms of our world.
In your story, your voice belongs center stage. So what if
you centered yourself to help the world to better understand you?
Thank you.